One, here we go. We are live, Evolved Conversations from Mangawai. And where's home for you right now, Frances?
I'm actually back in the office in Newmarket in Auckland.
Back in the office. So today I met Frances probably 3 or 4 years ago when we were in a business retreat up in Fiji, and I was just absolutely blown away the way and the layers that Frances can see things and the future. It feels like whenever we have a conversation, it's like crystal ball gazing, and I walk away with about 5 or 6 pages of notes, and my brain is swelling with a headache. So, Frances, thank you for giving me those great headaches. And I look forward to a 30-minute conversation today. Everything Evolved.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
So today's intention really is what is the future? How does that kind of lay moving forward? And we're going to kind of break it into 4 different parts. Is like the discovery, the dream, the design, and what's getting kind of deployed right now. So first question, Frances, what have you kind of discovered through this time, through the last 4 to 8 weeks?
So I think first and foremost is the people who predicted massive change in whatever form it was have adapted really quickly to this. But there is a lot of people right now who hadn't even thought about the complexities of change around, for example, sustainability and climate change. So when you suddenly have a black swan event like a pandemic, there's no preparation mentally for that. So we've ended up with 2 clear camps of people who are sort of adapting on the fly, and those who are still sitting in almost in shock horror of where they're at right now. But even the idea of heading back to the office feels so far away and so foreign that they can't plan next steps. They're kind of locked in limbo. That's a pretty tough place to be.
How do you the uncertainty, like obviously with tech futures, and you consult to large corporates, and you also run the future of education and help, you are helping shape the future of education. With uncertainty, how do you cope with that, and how do you kind of coach and reassure your first degree and second degree around uncertainty?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about being human is we spend so little time exercising our ability to adapt. You know, we physically train our bodies and we are really conscious of our health, but somehow when we get to our brain, we kind of hold on to things and we get fixated on what we know, instead of having this idea that it's like a conveyor belt. Information goes in and some information has to go out because it's no longer relevant. And actually in that process of adopting new ideas and actually being open to new conversations, you actually start to use your brain in a way that gives you real confidence about change. But when you lock it in, the second you're going to close the drawer and say, I'm good to go, I've got the information I need, then actually any change gets really difficult. So I really look to coach people about this idea is, why is that drawer closed? Like what made you be fixed on information and fixed on ideas that perhaps you saw or adopted or learnt under certain people? And what was it that made you stay still in that one place instead of being in this sort of sense of controlled motion through life, but also accepting that we get better information, we get better life experiences, we meet new people who change our points of view, and actually finding a real comfort in that and looking for that, because it's almost like an adrenaline that kicks in when you have a great conversation. And one of the really wonderful things I think over the last 5 weeks for me is I'm having long format conversations with people for the first time in a long time, because people have more time. And when you have a great conversation, it's really intoxicating. It's sort of like, wow, I've just had this great conversation, as opposed to I had this really brief interaction, which feels, very transactional and quite different.
As you were saying, is like, and I was having this conversation with Sarah last night, is that I feel like there's the adaptation into these times in regards to working from home, working remotely, and seeing it happen in Sarah's large scale, obviously corporate with the bank, is going back to the office is going to be foreign, and how companies are adapting right now to what this current climate is, but adapting back. You're not going to adapt back because there is no back, there's only forward. So that's an intriguing little scenario there. How do you think people are going to be able to adapt to this new normal?
So I can tell you from experience, having 5 weeks of lockdown and then back in the office this week, and when I say in the office, there's 3 people, so we're at a 2% of or 5% of what we'd normally have, and actually that in itself feels a little bit like coming back from summer holiday early, where there's a few people in the office and you're all looking at each other like, why are we the ones that had to come back early? Everybody's still out there, having this other experience. But actually, as the last few days, it's sort of becoming a bit more normal. Back in the office, what I realized is there's a kind of a grieving process as you went into lockdown, and sort of another grieving process when you come out of it, because we've learned things and we want to change things. So the companies, when you re-enter, who say, look, we know everything we knew before is kind of now thrown up in the air. It's a blank piece of paper. Let's change things. Yeah. Let's talk about how you want to work, when you want to work. What does remote look like for you? What's changed in your life? If you day 1 or day 2 in the job, have that conversation with your leader, your employee, whoever it might be, you'll feel pretty good. However, if you walk back into your old environment and they sort of say, right, back to 9 to 5, the traffic, the commute, racing for the kids, hiding the fact that you have to leave early to get to a sports game, all those things, I think you're going to get a lot of people who say, well, hang on, what didn't we learn? And actually, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore, and I'm actually going to look for a different type of environment to work in, which could actually leave some pretty big gaps in organisations who are sort of trying to get back to what they think is a sense of normality, as opposed to saying the new normal is the starting point where we leave our homes, and that's integrated into what we now know and we expect, and it's just one indicator of the shift that's going to happen as people start thinking about the balance between doing things they believe in, that they're passionate about, that make them feel like they're valued, but also having more time with the kids. Perhaps not all the time. I know there's a lot of people coming out saying, I never want to be a teacher. I'm really looking forward to and going to value my kids' teachers a lot more. But others have really discovered those relationships with their kids as well, or perhaps with each other. If there's people or flatmates, people who have started to understand each other a lot more. And I think, again, going back to long format conversations, I think a lot of people will be saying, I really want more of that. A bit like the fitness, I think a lot of us, actually I can say us, including myself, we've got more active and regular fitness than we've been able to for a long time, and not wanting to that's not going to go back. That's not a backward step back to,
It's been the great shake-up that we've kind of needed, and I have so much respect and thanks to all the frontline staff that are just working tirelessly around the clock, both domestically and internationally, to make sure this thing doesn't continue to blow up. But it has given us that shake-up, whether it's climate change, and I think I read or heard is that the Venice canals are the cleanest and brightest they've ever been, and Shanghai skies are blue for the first time. And then also, as you said, the activity is like, going for a walk. I've never seen so many people out, rain, shine, or as you said, people with kids, they just can't wait to get outside to get some. So it's kind of the shake-up that we need. And I'm really grateful for this time to be able to go internal and spend more time, as you said, kind of thinking, planning for what is next. Because as I said before, the live events and experiences was pretty much turned off overnight, but it's been interesting to see live events and experiences pivot online. And I was having a great conversation the other day with Simon Bowen, who runs Models Method, is that, Steve, you are really good at doing live events and experiences. You are still doing live events and experiences, just in a different room. It's called a Zoom room. Zoom, whatever platform you're using. And as soon as I kind of switched the mindset to that, and lent into some conversations with people in the US and Singapore, engagement levels have gone up, and I'm intrigued by that. So we've kind of pivoted this idea to go, you know what, content and curation is not needed as much when we come out the other side. People will come to events and experiences for the experience being the currency, the new currency moving forward. So I'm intrigued by that engagement.
Actually, can I just touch on that, because it's really interesting. If I put my education hat on, we run a number of postgraduate programs, as part of the graduate school, and we've seen such incredible engagement. Our students are mature adults, And they were all a bit reluctant, saying, what would it look like learning fully online through facilitated sessions like this? And actually, one, the technology is great, but two, there's a sort of an equalizing effect when you've got lots of people together when they're on screen, because everybody has their same real estate. Their face is visible. You can actually sort of clock what people are thinking and imagining, and you can engage with them in some ways on a more equal level than you can in a physical classroom or in a physical event, because often you can't work the whole room. So, there is an element which has been really a great experience. Although I have to say, I think everyone's looking forward to sort of a hybrid model of a bit, getting back to real people and clinking our cups of coffee together and sharing.
Exactly, and we'll touch on that new hybrid model next. But yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with someone in our Evolve community. He's 21 at the University of California, I think it is, and he gave me some stats, and he's like, the attendance level in classes have jumped like 55% or something by going to this virtual environment. So yeah, university is really thinking, is like, wow, we have this massive campus, but now it's being not utilized. What do we do next? And our students are happier because they can tune in, and the teachers can actually see the engagement go up. So in a dream state, what is this new hybrid? If we're just focusing on education, what is that? Because I know that's one of your true passion points.
And I think it's much broader than education, because actually we've done almost like this leapfrog of jumping ahead 5 years of technology in 5 weeks. And I think what we've done is we've done mass adoption of things that lots of people were resistant to deploy. Companies, particularly large organizations, that security and the risk and the investment and the what happens to culture and breaking the mold of, so many things that we have built on systems. So by breaking the systems, deploying technology, taking away and seeing that the risk that they imagined is not there, whether it's the way we work in our workplace or whether it's the way education looks, if we don't use that as a starting point for the next chapter, then actually, I think we're all going to see this sort of mass exodus of people from organizations that don't respond to change. And I think education and universities are going to be a big part of that. I have a couple of university students at home who are loving it and actually, they're just working the way they want. I mean, it does mean that they typically study through the wee small hours of the night and sleep all day, but that suits them at their stage in life. But it means that they are actually having more committed time to work on the stuff they love, because they're not having to travel back and forth to campuses. And, I can see a big shift in the way people think about education going forward, and also the relevance of the content. I use the example, if you went into an economics class tomorrow at university, it better talk about, number one, the elephant in the room being what's post-COVID economics or the economic model look like. Because if you go straight back to the old paradigms and you're sitting there with a bunch of, eager 20-something-year-olds saying, hang on, don't you realize something just happened that's changed everything? All the priorities of our economy are now different. Let's start with that as the new conversation. Let's not go back to information on the worksheets from 5 years ago. So it's going to change.
Massive upscaling and upskilling and of like all these textbooks that have been written for the last 30 or 40 years. Yes, there's some great wisdom in there that can come across, but hey, this is all new times. Like it's as you said, let's start the baseline here and kind of move up from that. With everyone having time at home to think on, like I'm seeing people picking up. A friend of ours is a creative Scribe Media, helps people bring books to life, and he ran a course around how to write your first book, and his vision is about everyone has a story to share, and we can help you bring that to life in a story format into a book. And he had 4,500 people turn up to this webinar to start sharing their story, open up from inside and write a book. And I'm like, that's fascinating. So all this time that we've had, people are leaning into is like, do I need to go back to the office? I need to commute? So
actually, just on the book scenario, I've been thinking about, we all have this book, which is once upon a time, there was a coronavirus and what did you do? Like, what did you learn? What did you adopt? What did you let go of? What did you actually become open to or explore or invent or learn? Because actually, when in life do we get weeks and weeks of kind of time where we can do things differently. And so I hope most people are writing a new chapter, or at least the first chapter of this new book, which is the story they'll tell their kids and their grandkids about what happened.
I'm just getting totally. I'm just getting a message. I'd be interested to see how schools adapt to it too, how to teach kids about what has happened and why the priorities have changed, and how to reframe the way we see the world from outside versus the inside out.
And I think it's really interesting because we have really a great straight line of sight into schools, so both primary and secondary schools, so that every school is quite different. I put them into 3 different camps. The first camp is we'll just reinvent the school day on Zoom. So we'll have classes between 9 and 3, and we won't get off Zoom. We'll just literally sit on it all day and have classes, which means the students never have time to reflect or to actually do anything. They're just sitting hour after hour, which is really, really tough. And I actually have a child at home who's learning this way and really finding it hard, because if you've got a class of 30 and one person needs help, everybody's in that conversation. You can't get away from it, because you can't sort of just tune out because you're right in that class. And then there's the others who are literally on emailed worksheets and have no idea what to do, haven't moved anything to the cloud, are fumbling and absolutely overwhelmed by what's going on. And then you have this group which have really taken on this hybrid approach, which is a bit of Zoom to facilitate conversations, and then getting students to go off and work on their own projects and doing discovery work and experimental, and then coming back and sharing. And that one is obviously the one that is having the most impact, because it's putting the learning emphasis on the student, and they can work in teams and they can use sharing platforms. And I think we'll do a huge analysis of education post-COVID and say which of these worked and why, and what do we need to adopt and adapt and change to respond better to a generation who actually have been wanting change from a traditional teacher at the front of the class for a long time.
As you said, we're being forced to change, like in an example in the bank as well, like Sarah mentioning that they've been working on a project for 5 or 6 months, and then looking at another 6-month rollout, and to be able to roll that out in 3 weeks because you have to. And just with education as well, you have to look at other options. And I love the three models, and I'm really fortunate I've got 3 kids across the 2 tribes at school going through that process, and I can see the system in Australia with Sienna's school, and then be involved with Luca and Lola's schooling at Whangaparoa College. And so I wish they're a college yet. No, they're not.
No, you don't.
No, I don't. But Whangaparoa Primary School, and just really engaged, and they have got the hybrid model, and it's amazing to see at 9 o'clock there's mat time, and they kind of have that sharing of stories and everything like that. And as a parent, I'm going to put my hand up, I wasn't super engaged in their education. I'd tune in to see how well they're going, read books, etc. But being able to be in the background to see how the classroom is actually running, and to see the engagement. Luca is a completely different human than what I thought he was at school. I thought he was the one always with ADHD like Dad and just running around like a crazy man, but he's not. He's super focused, and he's learning and growing. And to see how education can be the future, and then I'm engaged in his education throughout the day, and I'm like, that's a dream state. And I know Sarah's enjoying it too, to have 1 or 2 hours where you can tune in 100% into building that education, versus getting to the end of the day when you've worked the whole day and then you're tired, you don't have all the energy to try and have that engagement. And I'm like, I wonder what that would look like in a dream state moving forward, from a working parent and also child, how you can fuse that together. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I should say, in case you haven't heard of it, the grandparent hour, which has been deployed around the world, which is parents are busy, so putting Zoom on between grandchildren and grandparents, and getting grandparents to be the teacher for 1 hour a day, and ideally 2 if you've got 2 grandparents, and actually having a generational gap between them, teaching each other, and it's good for both groups. And actually a lot of my staff have now deployed that in their own lives, and it's been fantastic, because it gets the grandparents feeling like they're still connected, because they can't pop over and see them, but they've got a different way of thinking, and they bring stories. They're great storytellers, grandparents. So it's not so they've got a great way of learning.
That's fantastic. And I suppose another benefit of having a multi-tribe, and there's grandparents galore, obviously 2 sides of the family and everything, and they are feeling lonely and isolated because they can't have that will definitely adopt that, Grant, especially with Sarah's mum being an absolute maths whiz and primary school teacher. And that's another way for teachers to be able to help. Like, that's another job or opportunity, potentially retired teachers that still want to be able to help. So what job opportunities that you're seeing or new industries thriving right now that are getting designed right now to help and be of service now and to be able to thrive post-COVID? Because a lot of businesses jumping onto the bandwagon, PPE and health, but they will go like this afterwards. So what's
absolutely. And look, if you look at the sort of economic shifts that had already happened pre-COVID, so the sharing economy, people being this idea we don't have to own everything, we're happy to just use our phone to suddenly get access to a bike or a car and use other people's access to or the collaborative economy where people are starting to share a lot more with others and to get scale, and this idea of partnerships being really important. And then the gig economy, where people are starting to think about how you work across multiple sectors. So you're not looking for one single job because you can de-risk it because you've got by having a number of different things that you can do, not one role that could potentially collapse. But I think that the jobs that are coming through are certainly more tech-enabled with creativity. So those two things. If you look across at job sites right now, there's almost no slowdown in roles to do with the new economy around sharing, smart energy, sustainability, technology, automation, logistics, new ways of manufacturing, software, hardware. There's certain areas that are just thriving because they are often by definition low touch, that you're actually shipping zeros and ones, software, or you're shipping things which actually are underpinned by software. So if you think about some of the innovations that will come out of this, every time there is a crisis, adversity always drives creativity. And so the organizations right now who are forced to lay a lot of people off, and we're going to see a lot more of that. I mean, every day globally, we're starting to see more and more stats that they will start thinking about doing things differently. And I think differently means that people are going to have to, for the first time, potentially get comfortable with learning again. Because technology is not about sitting and coding. And I'm a technologist and I can't code. The last time I coded was more than 10 years ago. And so actually it's about understanding how things come together and what software talks to each other and what can you do to streamline and increase productivity so that you get more time to be human. And the great thing about being human is the more time we have to think, the more ideas we come up with, the more we go into sort of problem solving and thinking about new ideas. If we have a busy brain, or we're in an environment that what I call is over-indexed, which means if, for example, you're sitting in a bank and your whole life is in a bank, you think about banks, you think about the competitors of your bank, you think about the systems in the bank, you're thinking about fintech, and you're over-indexed in one area, your brain will literally be unable to process anything new because it's full. And so I think we need to find the ability for people in the workplace to have more time to be reflective about problem solving and thinking about how to do things differently. So going back and saying, you know what, we did spend far too much on these things, or a whole process or a system that was really obsolete probably years ago, but we've kept going with it for so long because no one's challenged it, because no one's had the time to think about how we do it differently. So problem solvers are going to become really valuable. If you can bring someone into an environment and save money straight away and saying, have you thought about doing this differently? Or actually, I can see a way where we can deploy this software that will give us more time to focus on our customers. Or there's just so many examples. So it's about saying, don't fall back into the structures that we had before, and actually really open our eyes to finding the time to problem solve new ways of doing things. And if you're not in technology right now in any way, if you're really quite fearful of it, I think this is the time where you really do need to understand there isn't a future that's analog. We need to understand what digitization does, and we need to understand what the cloud is for and how it's utilized and what software does. Not that you can build it, but that you can utilize it and understand how you can improve your business. I do feel for companies right now, retail, who've done nothing in e-commerce. So their disadvantage is twice as bad as anyone who's already got e-commerce platforms, because not only are they now potentially able to be trading, they can't. There's nothing they can do at this point in time to put their businesses online. And so you can't come late to this party anymore.
You can't. Or we mentioned it a bit, and I love how because there's a lot of people out there that I just read another comment. Some projects take too long because of fear of that change, but I think and people are worried about the word technology because they haven't been in technology or think they're not a coder or can write website and that sort of thing. And you just giving the permission there is like, you are a technologist, but you haven't coded in 10 years. And coding 10 years doesn't exist anymore. It's completely different.
No, totally true. And I think it's also those transferable skills. I mean, if you're a great project manager, you're a great project manager in technology as well. It doesn't change what you're good at. It means that you can systemize things and you're systemating your thinking. And if you're a great administrator, there is plenty of roles within technology that require really great administration. You know, the same way if you're a great creator, the visualization of data and, you know, we need pictures more than words, more today than ever before. And so there's all these skills that actually can just be shifted across. But we need to understand the language, because if somebody walks into an interview for a new job, they've been laid off from their job, and someone says, you know, tell me about, you know, what software do you use Slack channels and Trello boards, and how do you think about user journeys and design thinking? And they're sitting there going, whoa, I have no idea what you're talking about. Even though in 5 minutes of briefing, they could probably totally navigate that conversation. But if they've never ever heard it or never been open to hearing it, they're going to suddenly hit a brick wall. So it is about understanding the language of today, but also the priorities. You know, that if someone says a user journey, you need to know what a user journey is. You can't fudge that one.
No, exactly. and I like that as well, because that wonder and wonder, it all is all about bringing the willing and the wise together, and it's taken time to kind of navigate to work out how that. And again, this environment that we're currently in is kind of forced that to magically happen, like using my father as a prime example, and back to examples that you've given, is that he was 46 years in aviation, an extremely great project manager around how to execute on projects in the airline, and now bringing them in and just getting some of his wisdom around what he did back in the old school days, and just literally gave him a 10 or 15 minute how-to video on Asana, and how to kind of bring that thinking into Asana, which is an incredible project.
Tool.
Now he feels of value. And the biggest thing when people get pushed into retirement, he's like, well, what do I do now? I feel like I'm not up to speed with this. So he gave that great example. And the gig economy is that the wisdom is not going to die or dissipate once people have left the workforce or being made redundant. I just think that's super exciting little frame that we can kind of bring people together. And curiosity is that people are like, what is wonder and wonder? But you probably get it sometimes, is why do I need curiosity in our organization? Things are going pretty well until we have this like catastrophic event. It's forced people, as you said, to kind of think differently about what do I do and how do I evolve, as in, if you don't evolve the system will die. Look in nature and companies, organizations. So I
was talking to my dad the other day, and he's retired, but he was a builder, and he talks about the day where everyone was still hammering, nail and hammer, and then he went to a job site and there were all the guys with the big gun nail, you know, the nail gun things going, you know, and firing them off. And he said for 2 years he just looked at them and said, I won't say what he said about them, but he was so disapproving of this. It was kind of like the cheats way. It was like, how could they use this tool that was, you know, shortcutting the trade and the craft, but they were getting the job done faster. And then eventually, of course, he realized he had to give it a go. And it was like, oh, why didn't I, you know, it was that reluctance to change, where the technology has changed, doesn't take away the craft that you know of being a great builder or being a great administrator or being a great project manager, but the tools change. And you have to adopt the tools of the time if you want to stay relevant and competitive. And people need to know that you know those, because everyone is, you know, in a competitive market, and that's just the reality of any economy.
On the tools front, so technology, what technology sector is lagging right now that really needs to put their hand up to evolve? Where do you think, what industry, the biggest opportunity for people out there?
Look, I think it's interesting how few well, actually, there's a lot of people who still have not moved away from having their traditional kind of IT person with a server room and haven't moved to the cloud, and they're putting a lot of capital, or they're saying, look, I put $1 million or 10 million or whatever it was into my stack a few years ago, and I'm not prepared to move anything. And the second that you have holding on to that model and you haven't moved to the cloud, you're literally now unable to make the changes you need. So I think there's a whole sector of people network administrators from the past, who are sitting there holding on to their jobs because there are people enabling them to, because they are telling these organizations, you still need this. The cloud is risky. The cloud is security issues. Actually, this is part of it. It's like, who is giving the advice? Because actually sometimes the advice you get is by people who are terrified of what change means to their own role. And I see that a lot with policy people, where they've lived in the world of policy for so long. Doesn't matter how much evidence you give them that the world has shifted or things need to change. If that change means they also need to change, they're not going to promote it. And so some of the technology that we need to really adopt and to change is stuff that has been the backbone, literally, of organizations, where the biggest spend, the biggest capital outlay has been. Because a lot of the stuff that's been outlaid now in terms of SaaS models, software as a service, is really low cost. So if you think of a startup starting a business today, infrastructural cost of technology is so low. The hardware is low, connections to the cloud, the software is on a monthly basis. You can get going at a fraction of the cost of someone who started 10 years ago, who's still holding on to legacy hardware. And so, it's a really fundamental thing, but the larger the organization is and the more they've invested in traditional hardware, the more reluctant they are to change, the more they're held back. And it's this vicious cycle, so that someone coming in as a startup and who's going to come in as an agitator is just going to basically whip them, because they have got everything already straight off the ground at low cost, and they're not having to worry about how much they're depreciating.
So if you're not on the cloud, jeepers, you better start digging a hole. And so obviously I'm super excited as well, because Tech Futures and what you're doing at Mindlab, and finally put up my hand, because it gave me a lot of time to think about, as you said, when you're over-indexed in one way, and obviously travel and events and experiences, yes, I was 100% over-indexed. And I suppose the great thing with Wonder and Wonder kind of started to open curiosity again, but being able to go back into studying and be surrounded by other people in other sectors, and putting my hand up and going back and doing the Masters of Tech Futures. Do you just want to talk about what you guys are doing at Tech Futures, and what are you deploying to be the new normal out the other side, and how that's kind of changed? And then I can share a bit more about Masters.
Yeah, sure. So the Tech Futures Lab only started 4 years ago with this view of the future of work was going to look really different for professionals. And I looked around my peers and said, there's a lot of people trading on things they learned 20 years ago. And I was watching as some of them lost their roles or lost the confidence in applying for new roles because they just didn't have the right skills or understanding, because they hadn't been curious enough to really engage with the evolving world. And so when we started, it was fundamentally around, how do we provide a program that would get this conversation of cross-disciplinary, different sectors getting together, all who are mature adults, to think about what they want the next phase in their life to be, and what kind of projects they want to be involved in, and what kind of companies they want to form. And so we kicked off initially around a Master of Technological Futures to really focus on that, but we've also now expanded into things around the human potential and organizational agility, and we're looking at connected environments. We've sort of diversified significantly, but the fundamental thing is, how do you put bold conversations into a room of people, whether it's virtual or physical, in the same room, where there is no right or wrong answer, where you get to debate things and actually have the chance to think about how that might sit in your world, in your life, your personal life, and your working life, maybe things that drive you, particularly as you identify as you get older. And I think it happens often when people have children or have a life-changing event where they suddenly go, actually, I'm thinking about my legacy now, and I'm thinking about, who am I bringing value for? And if they're thinking the only value they bring is for their employer, that's a pretty sad place to be. And I think they had this moment of, I want to bring value for my community or my family, or I want for society, or even bigger, I want to do good for the world. And that's not a sort of a kumbaya, crystal ball gazing kind of, let's sort of be holistic. It's actually about the tangible decision of saying, I actually want something more for my life, and I'm going to be back in control of it, and not just sort of pick up at the next job. And I'm always frustrated to hear when people leave a job and give themselves no breathing room, and they sort of leave on a Friday from a job they may have been in for 5 years and start on a Monday in a new job. At what point do you step back and go, I'm going to give myself a sabbatical to think about what I want to do, and give my chance some scope to breathe and think about the things that are really important to me, or what passions I've left behind. Now, everyone's got a passion that they've left behind. It doesn't mean you're going to be just as good at ballroom dancing at 50 as you might have been at 18, or it may not be as great as rugby, but you've got these things that you just stop, and some of it's creative, some of it is around physical things you did, some of them is about having time when you're younger to read lots and be really well informed, and suddenly saying at 40, I haven't read a book for a year. Then you go, okay, why not? What have you traded off? What have you not let go of, so that you could bring it back into your life? If that gave you enjoyment, and it could be really simple things. It could be making a clay pot. We're not talking about necessarily changing the world, but just making sure you've got things in your life that's not just about doing what you do because you're on this conveyor belt and you haven't had a chance to get off it for so long.
And I think this time, and thanks for sharing, and this time right now is giving people that permission and that time to go and make that clay pot again, because they've got time, and they're like, okay. And now the curiosity in the brain and the over-indexing is stopped for a moment until they go back into the new normal. So yeah, it's really grateful. I can't wait to jump into the master's program, and I'll never forget, obviously, coming and spending a few days at Tech Futures. You're surrounded by so much wisdom, but so much willingness to help each other. And I had probably, I would not go out seeking to speak to someone in agriculture and the future of agriculture. And then you just naturally have that conversation. And I think this is where the physical environment's just going to explode, as people are missing that conversation that just happens like that. It's not prescribed. And to have that agriculture conversation to one of your lectures, it was amazing to get that understanding and then think, how can I adopt that into what I'm doing currently? So I can't wait for the master's program. Obviously, I'll share some links to people, because obviously there's a lot of different courses that you guys run at Tech Futures, and just get people thinking a bit differently. And to finish off, like Philip McKernan, who I had on yesterday, runs something called Brave Soul and Brave Mind, does amazing work in Colorado, and his thing is about one last talk. So often we go to the grave with some sort of resentment or regret that we didn't do one. So he gets people up to tell their one last talk and share. And I think maybe that's something we need to think about as well. It's like, let's go out and make those clay pots, or go and study something and be of service to our communities and organizations. So thank you so much for your time today, your wisdom, and your willingness to help. I know you've got some amazing projects around the corner that are just going to transform New Zealand, Aotearoa, which is great. So thank you.
I have one last question for you, Steve. How do you manage to have perfectly coiffed hair when everyone else is like me? It's just going out of control?
I was actually going to bring that up on the call today, because it's like, surely that's an essential services here. Hairdressers and haircuts, literally 5 minutes or 10 minutes before this call, it was an afro. It was out here. There's a lot of products. Usually it's a hat, but maybe this weekend I'll give it Luke give it the shave off and go bald for a few weeks. But that's how I did it. I love it. So thank you so much, Frances. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Bye.